The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to the SafePaas webinar series, the first one of 2019. My name is Jane Jones. I'm going to be working with Adil here. Just want to let you know if you have any questions, then please feel free to post them in the chat box below, or you can reach out to me on LinkedIn as well with any questions or queries you may have. So Adil today is going to be presenting the webinar, Are You Ready for 2019 ERP Access Controls? Are you ready for the audit? So Adil, I'll turn it over to you.
Hey, thank you, Jane, and thanks everybody for jumping on this webinar. We always appreciate people that are interested in learning about this important area of risk management, which is risk management within your ERP systems. That's kind of an area we specialize in to help you safeguard your digital enterprise. My name is Adil Khan. I'm the CEO of SafePaas, and we'll jump right into the topic at hand today. So here's a quick agenda I put together. You may have seen it in the abstract as well when you registered. So we'll just give you a basic introduction on our credentials, our capabilities, and then jump right into the main topic. And to get to really appreciate why predict and prevent is the methodology to select, is to really understand why the standard controls are not sufficient anymore. I won't get into a lot of the news media and regulations. You've all read that. You can Google that. But I'm sure that the purpose of you joining this call is to learn more about how to actually prevent those types of risks that occur and are make the media news every day. And so I'll focus more on the implementation aspects of something you can actually use in your shops. And it's very interesting to us. We've been looking at AI for the last couple of years, and we're finally in 2019 coming out to the market with some improvements in our AI, in our rules engine, which is more AI and machine learning enabled and becoming more and more so. And so you might be curious on how we see that moving forward, and I certainly have been really working closely with our product team over the last couple of years to make that happen. So we're finally getting there in the 2-year, what I consider and many others, a 10-year AI cycle, that we're in. So we jumped on it early on, and we hope to bring this benefit to you as our partners and customers. So we'll talk a little bit about that and then jump into how we do it and a few case studies of early adopters of our technology, how they're using it. I may not have time to go through all of them. I put one of the 3 studies together, but I mentioned several of them in the discussion today, so you'll be able to hear them out. So that's kind of the agenda for today. So please, as Jane said, put your QAs in the chat box throughout. Let's make it interactive. We really would like you to participate. And you know what I forgot to do was turn the recording on. This session is being recorded. Okay, good. So we are recording this session. So if you and your colleagues want to share that, I think Emma and Jane are going to put this out there for you to download and share with your team. Okay, so let's take a look. Next slide. So just quick on credentials. The main thing I want you to focus on is the upcoming event. So this is today's big webinar. We have the series of webinars. Typically, we do them the 3rd Wednesday of the month. So that gives you enough time before your financial month-end close and also previous month's activities. So that's kind of our sweet spot, but January is always a unique month, so it's towards the end of the month. We have a number of other interesting events this year planned for you. So in addition to the monthly webinars, we're going to be at Collaborate 19 in Texas, right here in Texas, where I'm based. So we're excited about that. Look forward to seeing you there. If you're in the US, for those of you that are in EMEA, we have a number of other events planned in EMEA. Just keep your eyes on our website and LinkedIn posts. We definitely promote those. So we're excited about doing ISACA in Europe this year, for example. Jane's been organizing that. She's based in Germany, and so a small hop for her. And many of you that have joined at this hour, I'm guessing, are from that part of the world. So it'll be a good, good spot for you to meet us and meet our team and so forth. We had a great success at UK user group last year. Great participation, and you may have seen some of our posts on LinkedIn and interviews with our Chief Strategy Officer. On the left is just our credentials where we participate and so forth. So we're pretty involved. We're really honored by Gartner as continuously being seen as one of the key multi-platform SOD players. So especially for the audit world where you have to go and deal with a number of ERP systems, that gives you a big advantage. And so that's something we provide as a part of our solution offerings. Quite a few customers we signed last year. We had about 50%, I think, growth in our sales. So we were very excited about that. You'll see a few of those on this logo list, and these customers are bringing some great ideas to us, as the 250 or so in the past have done. And that's kind of the essence of our machine learning capabilities, because we've been collecting this data for how to do remediation, how to identify risk, how to remove false positives. And I was just kind of going through our webinar series as I was building this one up, and so it looks like this has been a topic of interest to our prospects and market for a long time, and AI finally enables us to rely on machine learning to enable that. So the front end of the platform and the product offering is still the same. Just wanted to remind everybody, if any of these pain points match up with your needs, please reach out to us, and we'd be glad to provide you evaluations or offer you a demo or whatever you need to get into details. But you can see right at the top is predictive analytics, and that's the capability that is new and exciting, and we'll see more and more around this area. So predictive analytics is what's driving the demand for better risk management, because the reactive approach of detective controls has not really worked, and some preventive controls are too intrusive, where the customers have shied away from maintaining them. So we still recommend a preventive approach, but predictive makes it even more exciting for us, and that's been on our roadmap for years. So we're pretty excited to finally have the technology catch up with our vision, and we're going to talk about it. So with that in mind, today's topic, just to kind of cover, is AccessPass. That's what we're going to be covering. And within that, because of the limited time we have today, I picked up on iAccess, which is our user provisioning tool, and that does that's the first place we're adding predictive analytics. The advantage of that we have is, as you can see from here, is that because we also offer these additional controls around transaction monitoring for materialized risk, or look back capabilities, the soundness of your process through configurations in ERP or master data, etc. So this gives us an enriched environment where we can go in and really build out the quote unquote big data on our platform that enables us to then look at thousands of transactions that are available to users. I'll dig into the solution a little bit later, but just so you know, these are the two modules that are most specifically AccessPass, where I'll be talking about today. An SOD scanner is an example of something that you can try very quickly and learn about AI as well. So at the bottom, of course, is our ArcPass, which is our GRC management solution. So it includes audit risk and compliance capabilities, and it's a good foundation to have to build your application controls and IT governance platform. And then on top, you have process management, which is, you'll see quite a bit from us this year on financial close, procurement management, custom order management, data document controls. So that's another area of growth for us from our customers' demand. And then, like I said, predictive analytics, already covered that. So we look forward to doing more of these presentations around the topics where we have expertise and covering some of these items. Let's see, I'm going to turn this thing back. Oops. Sorry about that. I clicked on the wrong thing. Okay, here you go. So now let's talk about what are most customers doing. And I just picked one of the many ERP systems that we support. So I'm comfortable with Oracle platform since my experience working there and so forth. So I just picked an example in Oracle, but same thing applies to SAP, JD Edwards, PeopleSoft, and other tier 1 platforms, as well as many of the cloud platforms that we're From an application perspective, we're designed on a similar methodology as on-premise. So in terms of the design for controls, they have the same challenges. So, you've got Paula, that's a super user in Oracle, and she's got an employee record that's coming in from HR. So, by the way, this is the security screen in Oracle e-business suite, and I am using that as an example to demonstrate the limitations of access controls. You can go in, and your admin can go in and put in password policies. They're limited just to days and access and so forth. So fairly limited capabilities here. Also effective dates. Most customers will leave the 2 date blank, and there's no way to enforce that unless you customize this form, and most customers won't spend money on it. So you have most access granted indefinitely to employees, whether they are active or not, and that creates security risks, and many of our audit friends will tell you that. And the same thing here around assignments. So there's no control over super user assignments. So you can assign Paula super user access keys to the kingdom to any responsibility that is available and active in the system, which can be thousands. And as you know, each responsibility has hundreds of menus and functions. And so you're talking, for example, in a typical ERP system, about 30,000 transaction types or functions that can be assigned potentially to a user. So it's a very powerful system. That's the reason why companies buy ERP, but it also creates significant risk. And with the growing cyber threat, this is becoming a growing concern for our customers. So you'll see that, again, the indefinite date is defaulted here. So there's no requirement to put an end date. So Paula gets access to super user general ledger down here. She'll have access to it forever, basically, unless somebody changes that. So that would be one of the concerns. So you can see that the supervisor access, receivable access, has a number of not just sensitive data risk, but also segregation of duty risk, which is an area many customers are compelled to make changes, right? Okay, as we continue, you'll see also there are privileges buried into the menus. And so typical security model, whether you're following an ANSI standard role-based RBAC or you're following a ERP native format, you'll see the granting of pages ultimately or forms through menus or functions. And in this case, we're seeing that the ability here to go and access security, in other words, change your own security. Now that's hopefully not very common in many ERP systems. This has been locked down, but again, the methodology through which it's locked down and can be unlocked is fairly open. So what you're looking at is ERP controls that are probably not very effective for most organizations. And as our customer tell us, this is one of the most audited areas within their ERP system. And so you can read this yourself. I won't spell it all out, but you can see that because these privileges are not revoked automatically, many organizations have elevated access that's been granted to folks that perhaps don't need it. And sometimes it's out of just oversight, or just haven't had the opportunity to provide enough maintenance resources to the care and feeding of security model, which is very time consuming and unforgiving. IT operations primarily responsible for assigning and managing these users, as I said, but it's a very time consuming task, and it's, in my opinion, very inefficient for a modern day technology company. However, business units and IT security functions are responsible for covering, so these folks are also responsible for conducting privileged user access certifications. And so it's difficult, right? I mean, if you don't have that independence in the implementation of security and then testing of security, your auditors and your management find it very difficult to rely on that. And that's where a lot of the issues come up during the SOD audit. So the topic of today is 2019, and what's different about it? Well, in terms of ERP, it's the same old news, but the difference would be how to solve those problems. So privileged access rights that go beyond users' roles and etc. So you'll see that you can grant people access or users access that can also extend. So, if, for example, the concept of job role or duty role in an NC RBAC-based system, you can also inherit employee or manager privileges without actually explicitly being assigned. So that makes it even more challenging, and that's what many of the ERP cloud vendors are starting to use, right? So there's additional risk that needs to be examined, detected, and eventually predicted and mitigated to be able to prevent that. And the last point is the inability to create privilege, unified access across the enterprise, right? So being able to see all these privileges across the enterprise. What we mean by that is not just in a general ledger, but what if somebody has access to general ledger, to reverse journal entries, and also has the ability to create sub-ledger entries and payables to create liabilities. So that could be a financial misstatement risk, could also be fraud risk or operational risk, just depending on your risk control matrix. So these are examples of where customers are struggling with standard controls and therefore they're not effective. So let's take a look at business case for AI access controls. Segregation of duty has been around for a decade. We've been working on it for longer than that. But what does access control mean in today's world in 2019, and how can it help you get to a clean opinion on your control effectiveness? So just wanted to share some recent data with you. This is a survey produced by Harvey Nash and KPMG along with CIO in 2018. So pretty recent survey. And I wanted to point out the trends to you on when the question was asked of the CIOs that are working for the major companies globally, that, what's your concern around cyber attacks, right? So you can see that many of the concerns are line up with what you see in the media, which is basically the cyber crime. We've had issues like there are different like spamware, but it's grown into more ransomware, where systems are being locked in and so forth. And there's been some developments around criminal activities around that. So you can see that the anxiety level continues to grow in 2018. So it's a trend that doesn't seem to be addressed with the existing technologies. So definitely need for improvement there. This is a 3-year survey. You can see the 18 has grown case. And then there's more cybercrime that's not organized, I suppose, and that's again grown here. But what was interesting for us was the third in the top 3 was insiders, which is where most of our ERP systems come in. And so what we're finding is that the attackers are actually realizing and changing their mindset, right? They're saying that instead of going and hacking some individuals, we're going to try to now hack the ERP systems, and because that's where you store your customer data, right? So it's a top concern, given growing regulations. For example, GDPR in Europe is a big concern. A number of our customers want to protect their customer data, and you've seen some fines and so forth in the news. So that's as recent as 2017. And then employee data, emails, all of that information ultimately is creating ERP as a target, right? So even though we have been working on access controls challenges within ERP for many years, but now it's getting, even 2019, it's getting even more noticed because of additional threats such as cyber threats, the insider threat, and so forth. So this is a growing problem for the ERP applications. And the legacy application, like I said, many times back in the day, you would have an HR system, a finance system that were integrated through an ERP module. But as your systems are transforming to cloud and mobile, you may have 2 million devices and people connected to an ERP system. It's not unusual for some of the large multinationals. So it's becoming a more complex problem. So in risk world, we call it high impact and high likelihood. So when the risk is likelihood and impact is high, you have to treat it and respond to it by mitigating that risk. And that's basically the essence of AI and how it offers us a new promise in the market. So let's take a look at how we can build a business case for access and access controls. So I pulled out some of our thoughts, things that we've heard in our discussions with customers in 2018, to see how you can take some of these ideas to your business and your partners, and see, how can you use AI to really not only address the security concern, but also and compliance, but also improve the user experience and operational efficiency. So last few slides, you noticed that I talked about just the idea of how you provision users in today's systems is very inefficient. You have to go through old forms that were built a couple of decades ago in ERP systems, and the security model reflects that. So it's an inefficient process. So there's a business case not only to prevent the risk, but also to improve the productivity of the IT department, but also the user experience itself. With modern technology such as mobile devices and so forth, you can provision user access in these days. So there are 3 points that I wanted to pull out of many that our customers have told us. So one of the ones is that cyber risk increases with the adoption. So concerns around new technology that customers are adopting at a rapid pace to improve their own businesses and their agility and their customer service. So they're going to social, they're going to cloud, they're going to mobile, and that's creating many different touch points into the ERP eventually, which is a source of angst for many of the customers in terms of security risks. Standard ERP security is no longer sufficient. I think we made the case for that already. You've got wide open systems. You're relying on your network to protect the business. But if there's a breach, they're going to come after the ERP, as you can see from recent data. And that's where all your keys to the kingdom are, and that's where your sensitive data is. So there's a real risk of just data breaches under high penalties such as GDPR, the theft of intellectual property, other useful information like customer records and orders, possible fraud from within or outside, and just general sabotage and other security risks, right? So that's what we hear from our customers, that these are the reasons why they're moving forward with a modern day solution to support their 2019 and beyond. And the third point that you can see here is that user access requests itself is just a laborious process where we have many steps to go through. You may be using a help desk system to provision users, which ultimately gets sneaker-necked over to the IT department that actually enters a form. You may be using emails. So many different ways of provisioning, and that creates chaos by itself because you don't have a central place to audit. So that's one of the things we hear from our customers, why they're picking our solution. So what SafePaas AI promises to do is provide you this consistently enforceable access policies, including segregation of duties, data privacies, etc. And then we catch that, we predict that, and hopefully avoid that in your business before you actually go and provision the user that access. And that's where the threats and vulnerabilities can be reduced significantly. So there are 4 components to this, as you can see: security, compliance, user experience, and operational efficiencies. And if you take each one of those and examine your current situation, and then use our slides and this information to build out a business case, that'll get you to a significant ROI, return on investment, that your management would be interested in pursuing. So take a look at this, and feel free to, like I said, reach out to us if you have any questions. So now I'm going to talk a little bit of technology here, see if we can get into the little bit of our solution. So this is a typical example of deep learning, which is what AI is all about. So basically, you take the input, and in the old days, it was a single rule-based system. So in the old days, we would write, for example, an SOD rule that says if somebody can create a supplier, they should not be able to pay that supplier. Very obvious thing, because you don't want to have the risk of misstatement or fraud risk where somebody can create themselves as a supplier and pay themselves. Okay. There are many other examples. We have a repository that we've been building over the last 15 years. So we have probably 1,500 of those rules. Well, the problem with rules is it's only limited to our minds and our ability. With machine learning, we have these things called the hidden layers. So instead of just relying on the rules, which is the input into a access controls or policies. So these are your standard policies. Now, in the old days, we would go through maybe a single layer of looking at menus and functions. So we would cover we'll be able to cover a single layer through a rule-based engine. And then we would generate the output layer, which in this case would be SOD violations. So this was the old world where you define the rules, and then you look at the data, and then you basically produce the results. And that becomes your policy violation or access policy violation report from our product called Policy Manager. So these non-hidden layers is where we have false positives, we have missed risks opportunities, we have customizations, we have transactions that were conducted by users, but they don't no longer have access. So quite a bit of risk was not we weren't able to detect that. Sub functions in Oracle, for example, and so forth. So what machine learning does for us in a very simple, way that I can understand is to learn how to make correct decisions by looking at these hidden layers. And I'll give you an example of that in a second. That attempt to generalize and increase the level of complexity over input features. So, like I said, I'll give you an example, but hidden layers will basically, machine learning will enable to identify those layers and learn from those layers, and then apply that logic, that fuzzy logic, to the rest of your case. So the access controls for ERP makes almost a perfect case for that, because you run these controls many times during the month, maybe continuously as well. And so you're collecting a ton of data about users' access rights into your ERP transactions, but also the transactions themselves as they're flowing through it. And if you have, it's not unusual for customers to have 20,000 invoices a month going through the system, like corresponding payments and POs possibly. So you can see how this data has grown. So our own, because we are a cloud-based system, that's how we came to market. We have developed in our cloud platform this big data, quote unquote, where we have, I think it's up to 4 terabytes of information about transactions and users' access and activity around those transactions. So that was kind of the gold mine for us. We already had all this information, and we had the starting point, which is the rule set itself, the ability to find some level of hidden layers and then generate results. So this new technology enables us to generalize that and really identify those hidden layers that were not interpreted by us and our audit partners and so forth. So let's take a look how that can possibly help with the access controls problem now. So as an example, I picked on segregation of duties because that's a common concern to most of our customers. Like I said, there's data privacy concerns for GDPR, which we have done some webinars last year, so the recordings are on our site if you're interested in that, especially in EMEA. A majority of the companies are complying with it now. And there are other, industry-specific requirements around access controls. For example, we work with the Department of Energy, a subsidiary that is responsible for nuclear protection of nuclear arsenal in the U.S. And so security clearance levels are very important to them. So it could be industry-specific, or it could be a general item. But I picked on user privileges. So this is a typical, so in the old world, what would happen is you have a user named, John Doe that has access to a responsibility, kind of continuing with my example from the previous slide, where I described the old method. So in the previous world, what would happen is we would detect that problem by looking at John's direct rights, right? So we'll be able to see, okay, John has access to, for example, payables manager responsibility, and that's fine because he works in a department. We would also go to that so-called hidden risk, which is one layer. So we'll say, okay, well, what does that mean? Because if John is a manager, does that mean that he has all the menus that are just tied to AP, or does he also have possibly a menu tied to suppliers? If he does, then obviously it's a risk. So that's kind of another layer that we're going into based on the rules we have defined. And then basically from there, we would go to the functions and then go identify other users that have that same access, right? And that's where we would stop, right? So, but the question is, if somebody wants to address the risk, what happens if you make the change? And so you have to go through these additional levels. So we identify that if we were to remove this access, it'll also impact Monica Johns here, which is also Monica is a payable supervisor, and also other payable users that we have in our shared service center in Prague or whatever, right? So you're seeing that the impact is to payable users and so forth. So during this analysis, now the new modern world, we are able to go further and deeper into not only the structured menu relations, but also the transactions that overlay this data. And so they're in the background, and these are the layers of transactions that have been flowing that are hidden to us as humans, but the machine learning enables us to basically go into the transactions that are shared or executed and really provide us that next level of AI-enabled control testing capabilities, so we can predict the risk and also predict if there's any new access being granted to a user around that specific area. So that's where the hidden layers are now part of the machine learning capabilities and segregation of duties. So I hope that makes sense. I mean, it's a fairly deep technology discussion, which I won't have time to get into. But if you want to have that discussion with us and see the demonstration of how we do it, please reach out to us. Yeah, so that's the implementation of rule-based access controls that are now enabling us to do machine-enabled, AI-enabled controls. Okay, let's continue. Okay, so from a preventive perspective, that was kind of a predictive perspective. We also mentioned we want to talk about preventive controls. So from preventive controls, these two technologies kind of work hand in hand. And this is an example of how they work together. So we start off, as I said before, we look at the application rule sets. So we have a rules manager that basically maintains the human input, the rules that, just like before, that we would come up with from our rules repository. So like I said, we have a repository of thousands of rules we have built over the years for our customers and their audit partners. So we'll start with rules. So let's say we pick up a rule called don't let someone pay a supplier if they're already creating suppliers, right? So that's a typical segregation of duty risk. Now, what iAccess, which is the tool AI that we're enabling with AI, does, it also scans not only just the ERP system, but also the hierarchy of employees and managers. Okay, so this may or may not be in your ERP system. Many of the organizations keep their HCM or HR system in a separate environment, and they don't necessarily use that for this type of analysis. So you basically extract that information, and then you also look at their IT infrastructure, right? So you look at what kind of Active Directory, or if you're using IDM solutions, there are many in the market. We work with Oracle IDM, we work with SailPoint, Okta, many others. So if you have an IDM system, we can, or that Active Directory at a very simple level, we can extract data and manage that as well. So this gives us kind of the big data layer for a specific customer on where all possible access information is in that very first swim lane, right? So all their access attributes within the system, outside the system. So we get some interesting requests from our customers like, well, can you protect me from somebody accessing contracts if they're in the credit department? They shouldn't be able to go change a contract and then go update the credit term. But the contracts we have are sitting in SharePoint or one of these modern box kind of solutions, right? So yeah, we can do that because with smart controls or AI and access controls, we can see the full access level, and we have built out that data source with all the attributes enriched that can help the machine then pick up those connections that are not explicitly defined inside a system. Okay, so we're joining all that information, structured and unstructured. And then we can, when the requester actually comes in and places a new request for access and the enterprise through iAccess, the rules manager actually looks at the request. But in the new world, what we do is we actually pass that request over to our machine learning engine, AI engine, and the AI engine will then analyze that requester and approver information and basically look for those hidden access points that are not visible within the discrete rule itself. And based on that analysis, we will generate a workflow request that's up to 5 levels. And depending on what the AI enriched information is, it may go to just the one manager because there's no risk, or it may go to up to 5 levels based on the heightened risk all the way up to the CFO. If somebody's asking for access to journal entry over $50 million or something, just to pick a number, that may be a risk that gets only treated at the top level. So anyways, based on that information, then we can update the role itself. So that's been in our wheelhouse for many years, where we actually provision access within ERP systems. So if you don't need a full-blown IDM solution and you're looking really to automate your single sign-on capabilities, this can serve as a very cost-effective way for you to get to single sign-on because we have that Active Directory information and we're linking that and connecting that into your ERP. You can then analyze that information here. And that user basically uses our data probe technology, which is our ETL management tool, that enables the administrators to now focus more on the risk and treatment of that risk by looking at these dashboards, security dashboards, instead of wasting their time on just users pinging them, hey, do I have access? Why didn't I get access? Why was it rejected? What should I ask for? All that is being handled by the iAccess solution, which has AI components coming in, the new release, to help you streamline, automate that process. So that's in a nutshell how we can help you prevent risk in new requests as well as predict risks in the existing request. So that's basically what I wanted to cover on these two slides, this one and the previous one. So let's continue along. Okay, so we'll talk about a few case studies and then kind of show you a few examples of how our clients are using this technology. So the first one actually I picked up, let's talk about that, is It's actually a high-tech company, supplier of software marketing solutions for the automotive industry. And as you may appreciate, the industry has, it's an old industry, established industry, and it has significant multinational footprints. So the company has a 100-year legacy of providing products and services, and they're in a global. They compete on a global level with customers around the globe. They were looking to improve segregation of duties. They've already have great auditors, good controls in place, so it wasn't a question of just putting more SOD controls, more of the same. They were looking for a more advanced and a more effective way of providing coverage because they were taxed with the SOD risks and violations that were coming out of the system, and then trying to treat those with the legacy tools that are in the market that are very much rule based. So yeah, that's what we're looking for, and so they also wanted to monitor their super users because they couldn't. They have a big support team to support the global business, and people from time to time needed super user access to perform certain tasks. So they wanted to monitor the behavior and potential and predict the risk of granting that super user access. So they signed up with 3 of our solutions: SafePaas, which is the platform itself, iAccess, which is the example I showed you, and also a little extension within iAccess, which is called Firefighter ID, which is specifically designed for users with, essentially super user or elevated access to fire a fight, so to speak, in the business. And so that's kind of the starting point for this company in terms of organization and challenges, and how when they pick the solution, the business justification for them for solving their problems was around these capabilities and objectives that many companies look at, for example, reducing cost, improving efficiencies, and so forth. So they were able to make a case where they can eliminate 80% of the manual steps in their provisioning process, and their audit and remediation costs could be reduced over 150,000 in the very first year, which was a big win for them. And the way they measured that is, like I said previously, once you automate provisioning, your system administrators can spend less time on answering help desk emails and so forth, and eyeballing those risks or even rule-based risk, and improve that. And the audit cost comes from predictive analytics, because now the auditors can see those hidden and the management can see those hidden access points and risks, and then be able to remediate them. And they were able to do that efficiently within the first year, helping them save $150,000. They were able to create additional access policies by the capability in our system, identifying some hidden risks that were missed in their old system and the audits. So that helped them prevent those risks in the future years. Lower IT total cost of ownership. So it's not only have helped them reduce their security and controls costs within the ERP, but that was a big chunk of their overall ERP management process. So being able to roll out new roles and responsibilities that weren't approved. We have something called a Roles Manager that's also being AI enabled. So that will enable you to go and basically identify toxic roles themselves, and roles assignment to those will replace them with better roles through simulation. So that capability is very helpful. And then ultimately improving their ability to have better, more effective controls where the access logs are made available in a central platform. For example, if you're using an IDM or ticketing and a SOD solution, you have 3 or 4 places to go to build out that audit data and go through that review process. We do it all on SafePaas. So you have a single source, single platform that covers all of that audit logs and audit activities, from detecting risk, predicting risk, logging risk, remediating risk, mitigating risk. So it's all in one place. So that saved them a ton of time. And the last point there is just to be able to improve the user experience by enabling users to self-service and address their SOD violations themselves, and addressing them in a predictive way that was not possible before with the old legacy systems. So that's one example I wanted to cover with you. I'll show you some screenshots, and then I'll mention a few other examples as I go through it, if you hang on with me. Okay, so that's what the provisioning solution looks like, and I think we're running out of time. Just got a note, so we'll try to wrap it up in next 3-4 minutes. So the commitment was for 45 minutes, so I'm a little bit over. But let me go through these slides, and then feel free to, like I said, download this from our LinkedIn post that Emma or Jane will be putting out there in the next 24 hours. So yeah. When you request a new responsibility as an employee, you remember that old screens I covered in Oracle as an example. In the new world, this is machine learning enabled user access provisioning, for example. So you can see a list of responsibilities you're most likely to pick from, and if you're coming in as a firefighter, which means you're being you need some elevated access to resolve a business problem, you would click on that, and our system will look at your profile, and based on that, grant you access. So we're actually granting, in this example, access to a super user, but this is where the predictive learning capabilities pick up and start tracking and monitoring not only the discrete access points within the super user, which gives you access to create set of books, ledgers, and so forth, but also heuristic-based access to, for example, payables and other modules that's not directly linked. And then you can select an end date on when that. So remember, we talked about the end date was not even a requirement in the old form. Here we force that, so the user has to put an end date, or their manager would have to put an end date, depending on how. And then it goes through an approval cycle. So you can compare and contrast this with what you saw in the standard ERP form, where it was just done by a sysadmin. Here I'm requesting my access, and it's going through a submission process. Also, the request goes to their manager for approval in an email, and so they can approve or reject that email, and then it comes in, and they can approve and reject this email. If there is a conflict or a heightened risk, that would be highlighted here in the body of this message, and that can be addressed as well. And then finally, if there are any SOD issues as a result of that, you'll see them right away in here. So none of that is happening. All these steps are not happening when you use the standard ERP security form, and that's where the value is. That's where the business case is, or those benefits that I talked about throughout the presentation today. And then once throughout this provisioning process, the user is getting notified. So anytime their request is approved by the approver, they're listed, the information is provided, and then the complete preventive privilege log is available to the manager that shows what level of access they had, when did they access it, who validated that access, and they're verifying that, right? So just because somebody was granted access doesn't mean that they only did what was asked for. They may have done something different, and so we provide a complete audit trail of that. So you can go in and see the whole audit trail, and with preventive control, who approved it, who was part of that. So now, as I said, it's a single platform where you not only have the SOD controls, but also have all the user provisioning information for the enterprise, as well as the record of any approvals and rejections. So complete audit trail on a single platform, which the fragmentation of is solved. That problem is solved, and therefore you can go in and process this and rely on the system. So that's kind of the main example. We're coming to the end of presentations. If there's any questions, please put them out there, and we'll answer them. I see one question around people are curious about other examples. So yeah, I'll give you a couple of more examples, and then we'll wrap it up. So, for example, I mentioned the U.S. government agency already, and there's another company that we're working with that's in a telecom industry. I think somebody from telecom is looking for a reference. So yeah, so in a telecom industry, which is one of our
references. What we do is telecom tends to be multinational. You know, this company has, our client has, operates all over Latin America and Africa, and they provide cellular services, phone services essentially, to customers in those regions. And so they have quite a few different organizations set up, and their big challenge for access management was they wanted to delegate the access management capabilities down to the field because of time zones and countries and languages within the ERP system. So we were able to provide them that solution by putting the user provisioning and delegating that down to managers in those business units, and then at the same token provide the SOD reports to their corporate in London, where they're able to look at the overall risk patterns and run predictive analytics and see where the risk is across the enterprise. Inventory is a big risk for them, and they're looking to mitigate that. The last example I'll give you regarding that question is around a CPG company in Africa. So we have a partner, customer that came through one of our big four audit partners. Audit partner conducted the audit on this multinational consumer products goods company and identified significant risks in their ERP systems, also, you know, fraud risk and other types of risks. And they brought us in to help improve that and streamline their user provisioning process and add some heuristics-based intelligence to look at materialized risk, as well as their efficiency around the provisioning process. Again, being in Africa and many different countries within Africa, they were looking to streamline this process and have it standardized across different countries. And so they were able to leverage SafePaas to get that data, and their auditors are now able to go to a single source of evidence and collect all that information. So I'm sorry I've gone over a little bit on time, but hopefully this was worth your time. So we'll wrap it up. Jane, are there any other additional questions?
I don't see any. So thank you all for attending and spending the time with us today. You will be sent a recording of the webinar, and if you please feel free to email me with any questions you have. I'm more than happy to help. So thank you again, and goodbye.